The chamber was a coliseum of light and shadow, vast enough to swallow her whole. Thousands of alien delegates rose in tiers, their bodies alien in every possible sense. Shapes that defied symmetry, skin that shimmered like molten glass, mouths where no mouth should be. And every single one of them was laughing. The sound was not human laughter, but it carried the same venom, the same dismissal. It was the sound people made when they saw something small and thought it foolish for trying to stand tall. Shackles bit into her wrists, cold band of alloy engraved with faint, crawling glyphs. The metal wasn't made for human skin. It chafed like it was trying to remind her she didn't belong here. Illyria Miles stood at the center of the floor, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, luminescent material. Above her, banners of 1,000 star systems hung in slow rotation, each marked with the sigil of the Empire. Every one of those sigils was older than humanity's first spaceship. And yet here she was, a human captain on trial for daring to defy them. A voice boomed through the air, amplified by a lattice of sonic emitters. The High Chancellor's form shimmered within a column of pale blue mist, its body half-veiled like some ancient statue worn down by time. Captain Illyria Miles of the Terran Compact. You stand accused of unlawful possession of prohibited technology, violation of galactic trade statutes, and the intent to destabilize the balance of the stars. More laughter rippled across the chamber, some mocking, some incredulous. She kept her expression still, letting her eyes scan the tears. She had faced pirates who would get a crew for a handful of rations, smugglers who thought betrayal was a form of negotiation, and storms on dead worlds that could tear steel like paper. This was different. This was contempt on a scale humanity had never earned. Yet here it was served like an old grudge. The Chancellor's voice deepened. Your species has been tolerated within the outer trade lanes for a mere century. You are industrious, entertaining, occasionally useful. But dangerous? No. You lack the years, the reach, the refinement. A pause, just long enough for another wave of derisive chuckles to spread. Illyria felt the heat of the lights above her head. She didn't speak yet. Let them think she was small. Let them think she was afraid. The trick with predators was that they paid the least attention right before the moment you struck. The memory came back to her with unwelcome clarity. The derelict ship drifting in the slow current of the Lurex dust belt. They'd picked up the signal almost by accident. 3 broken pings repeating every 40 seconds. No registry. No transponder. Hull plating scorched black by centuries of radiation. They'd expected salvage at best. Maybe a dead captain's log to sell to a collector. Instead, they'd found the artifact. It had been cradled in the center of what might once have been a navigation chamber. A sphere the size of her head, layered in bands of pale metal so smooth it seemed liquid. Each band carried symbols that hurt to look at for too long, as though they wanted to slide out of the mind before you could hold them. When she touched it, the air had shifted, not in temperature, not in pressure, but in weight, like the universe was leaning closer. And in that moment, she'd known it was something no one in the current galaxy could make. They hadn't had it for long before the Empire came. An intercept cruiser, silver and angular, with the smug confidence of a predator that's never been wounded. The alien commander had been polite at first, in the same way a customs officer might be polite when demanding your wallet. Hand it over, they'd said, it's dangerous in the wrong hands. She'd asked how they knew it was dangerous. The commander's mouth, a horizontal slit under a glassy dome, had twitched because it had answered. It was dangerous in any hands that weren't theirs. And that was that, except she'd said no. In the days after, the rumor started. She was a smuggler. She was a war criminal. She was an idiot human who didn't understand the weight of what she'd taken. They'd sent diplomats first. When those failed, they'd sent hunters. And now, after weeks of pursuit, here she stood, accused in the highest court in the galaxy. The Chancellor's final question drifted through the chamber. Do you plead guilty? Illyria raised her head. The lights caught the faint scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw. I plead, she said softly, that you've all mistaken the lamb for prey. The translator field caught the words, but something about her tone made the delegates' voices falter. Just for a moment. Then the laughter came again, louder this time, as if to bury the spark. Her mind slipped backward further still, to a younger self under a cracked sky on a mining station at the edge of nothing. Her parents had been lost in an ore hauler collapse. She'd learned early that no one came to save you, that survival was a matter of using what you had, no matter how little. That was what the aliens didn't understand. They had empires behind them, fleets, history stretching to the dawn of stars. Humans had nothing but their hands, their stubbornness, and the understanding that nothing stayed impossible for long. She let the Chancellor drone on, listing charges, but she studied the chamber. Every delegate had their own crest before them, each inlaid with the precious metals of their homeworld. Symbols of power, all of them. She counted, memorized, cataloged. Information was leverage. Even here, in shackles, she could play the game. Her capture had been a dance of near misses. The Empire had chased her through asteroid belts, across unlit drift lanes, into gravity wells of dead moons. Every time, she'd escaped with some trick they didn't see coming. She'd once dropped her ship into a debris field and matched the tumble of an ice chunk for 12 hours until they'd passed. Another time, she'd vented atmosphere from one side of the hull to spin her ship without thrusters, making it invisible to heat scans. They'd thought it was luck. It was never luck. The artifact was hidden now, even from her own crew. She'd split them before the capture, sending half away on a decoy run. The Empire believed they had everything. Her ship impounded, her hands bound, her mind cornered. But the real weapon wasn't the artifact. It was a fact that they didn't understand her kind. The blade wasn't forged of steel. It was made of every scrap of human the galaxy had laughed at for 100 years. The Chancellor's voice rose, formal and final. For these crimes, you will remain in custody until the tribunal convenes. Your possessions are forfeit. The technology you claim to possess will be secured for the safety of all species. The delegates stirred, satisfied. This was the part where most defendants collapsed, begged, or bargained. Illyra simply inclined her head, as if she'd agreed to a minor delay. 2 guards moved at her sides. One was insectoid, its limbs jointed in threes, its carapace patterned in crimson and gold. The other was something like a bipedal eel, its skin slick and faintly luminous. Neither met her eyes. The laughter still echoed faintly as they led her out of the chamber. In the corridor beyond, the air was cooler, the lights dimmer. The guards didn't speak. Her mind was already running ahead. Time was her ally. They thought she was powerless, which meant they wouldn't watch for the ways she could still reach. The first rule of captivity was that the walls were never as solid as they looked. Illyra had learned that as a child, staring at the bulkheads of a mining dormitory and realizing that behind every surface there were gaps, seams, and currents of air that no one thought about. The cell was no different. The shimmering containment field might have been tuned to her biology, but it still had a rhythm, a faint pulse of energy that rose and fell like a heartbeat. She sat cross-legged on the narrow bed and counted the beats, marking the fluctuations. Every system had a moment of weakness. You just had to find it and be patient enough to wait for it. The guards had grown lax already. She could hear it in the drag of their footsteps when they brought her food, in the way they didn't check her bindings as carefully as the first day. The Empire's arrogance was a weapon she didn't even have to sharpen. They believed the cell was enough. They believed she had no reach. That was the opening. Her meal tray came with utensils made of soft, flexible composite, designed to bend before they could be sharpened. She twisted one until it snapped, exposing a narrow fiber that had just enough stiffness to be useful. She worked it between her fingers, feeling the shape it wanted to take, and slid it under the seam of the bed's mount. The composite flexed against resistance, groaning faintly, until it popped the panel loose. Inside was a nest of conduits, power, atmosphere, data. She didn't touch them yet, not until she was sure the guards didn't suspect. On the 4th day, she was let out for questioning, not interrogation, at least not the kind she'd endured from pirates and Belt, but a carefully staged performance. The Imperial Inquisitor wore a robe woven from something that shimmered between solid and liquid. It said casting the face in shadow. The voice was neutral, almost kind. It asked her about the artifact, where she'd found it, what she'd learned from it. She told the truth about the derelict's location. Anyone could find it now, but nothing of what the sphere had shown her when she touched it. The Inquisitor's silence was long enough to register as displeasure, but they didn't press. That was confirmation enough. They didn't fully understand it either. That night she worked in the wall, teasing a single cable loose. It was a thin communications line, probably running to the cell block's monitoring hub. She stripped the insulation with the edge of her snapped utensil, exposing a braid of metallic fibers. Her fingers ached from the fine work, but she didn't stop. When the pulse of the containment field dropped into its trough, she tapped the exposed braid against the bed frame. The spark was tiny, almost invisible, but it made the cell's lights flicker. That was good. That meant the line was alive. By the sixth night, she'd mapped the pulses well enough to send bursts along the line. Nothing coherent yet, just noise. But noise could be as useful as speech if you knew how to aim it. Somewhere in the ship's systems, a maintenance subroutine would flag those bursts. Somewhere, a board tech would dismiss it as interference. But somewhere else, in the encrypted channel she designed with her crew, the pattern would mean I am here. She slept in snatches, her dreams fractured by the memory of her crew's faces. Rian, her pilot, with the permanent squint from too many hours staring at NAV screens. Sarah, the engineer, who could coax a drive back to life with spit and curses. And Kellen, the quiet one, who carried an entire library of human history in his head and could recall it like he was opening a book. Each of them would have their part to play when the signal reached them. On the 8th day, she got her answer. Not in words. No signal could be that obvious. But in the change of the cell's hum, the containment field's rhythm shifted, almost imperceptibly, as if the ship's systems were under a new strain. That was the sign. Her crew was moving. She stepped up her work. The noise burst became more deliberate, more frequent, shaped into patterns that would look random to anyone else. It wasn't about sending instructions. It was about creating the illusion of instability. In a place like this, any hint of a breach, any suggestion that something wasn't working as it should, would ripple upward. And in the Empire's hierarchy, ripples meant overreactions. The overreaction came on the 10th day. A squad of armed guards arrived without warning, their weapons trained on her as the cell's field dropped. They cuffed her again and marched her through a series of corridors she hadn't seen before. These walls were different, metallic, seamless, cold. The air smelled faintly of ozone. She was brought into a smaller chamber, this one with no audience, no chancellor, just a single figure behind a curved desk. The figure's skin was a matte black, eyes like pools of molten silver. No expression, no movement beyond the slow flex of its fingers. "You are not cooperating," it said. No introduction, no preamble. "I'm not resisting either," she answered. "You asked me questions. I answered the ones I could. You could answer more." "I could," she agreed, "but I won't." The silver eyes narrowed a fraction. "Your species mistakes stubbornness for strategy." "Maybe," she said, "and yours mistakes arrogance for strength." There was a long silence. Then the figure leaned forward. "The object you claim to have discovered belongs to the Empire. Everything belongs to the Empire, doesn't it?" Another silence. Then, "If you will not yield it willingly, we will take it from you and from any who shelter it." That was the line she'd been waiting for, the confirmation that they still didn't have it. She let a slow smile form. Good luck with that. She was returned to her cell, but not the same one. This one was deeper, colder, with no wall panels to pry open. They'd learned from her, but not enough. She still had the channel, still had the pulse, and now she had the proof her crew needed. The artifact was safe, and the Empire was hunting it blindly. In the following days, the real operation began. Somewhere out there, Rian and Sarah would be planting the seed of the story in the datanet. Not a direct broadcast, but a leak, something a minor trader would stumble across and pass along, something that would grow in the telling. The story would say that the artifact wasn't just old, it was dangerous, that it could rewrite reality itself, alter the laws of physics on a whim. Absurd, of course. But in a galaxy where empires fear the unexpected, absurdity had teeth. The first sign that it was working came in the form of whispers from the guards. She caught fragments when they thought she wasn't listening. References to war councils, to factions within the Empire disagreeing on the next move. Some wanted to seize the weapon immediately. Others wanted to destroy it before it could be used. Fear had begun to seep into the cracks. By the 15th day, the laughter was gone. No more mocking glances from passing officials. No more casual dismissal. They looked at her now with something colder, sharper. Not respect. Not yet, but the first tremor of uncertainty. She filed it away. Uncertainty was the soil where fear grew fastest. The first fleet arrived without ceremony, the cold gleam of Imperial hulls blotting out the stars. From the observation deck of the Mistral, Illyra counted the ships. Cruisers in tight formation, corvettes darting at their flanks, the looming bulk of a dreadnought at the center like the heart of some mechanical beast. Any sane captain would have run. She stayed. The coordinates she'd chosen were deliberate. On the edge of a red giant's corona, where the electromagnetic storms were violent enough to shred most long-range sensors. They would see her, but they would never see clearly. The comms crackled with the first hail. A clipped, formal voice ordered her immediate surrender, promising leniency if she complied. She didn't answer. Instead, she had re-bleed static into the line, just enough to make it seem like the interference was real. The voice repeated itself, sharper this time. Still, she let the silence hang. Empires were not used to being ignored. Her hands rested lightly on the console as she watched their formations shift. They were nervous already, overcompensating for the interference. Sarah's readings on the red giant's fluctuations were coming in on a separate encrypted channel. The numbers steady but climbing. The star was old, unstable, ready to flare with the right push. And the push, in this case, would be the artifact, or at least what they thought was the artifact. In truth, the sphere now housed nothing but a carefully rigged array of pulse generators and sensor-mocking emitters. It couldn't rewrite reality, couldn't change the laws of physics, but it could make every sensor in 100,000 kilometers believe that the star's decay was accelerating to a catastrophic point, and that, for a fleet that had never seen a supernova up close, was enough. She gave the order. Sarah's fingers danced over the controls, and the false readings began to broadcast. Instantly, the dreadnought's formation shifted again, pulling back slightly, like a predator sensing a trap. The comms flared to life once more, this time with a different voice, measured, deliberate. The High Chancellor himself. "You are playing with forces you do not understand, Captain Miles," he said. There was no mockery in his tone now. "Stand down and deliver the object. You will be spared." She leaned toward the mic, her voice low and even. "You think we fear dying here? You think that's what keeps us still? No, we fear only one thing. Chains. And I will burn with this star before I let you bind us." A pause. She imagined the ripple that would send to the command decks of every ship in that fleet. Humans were supposed to be rash, yes, but suicidal? Not in a way that threatened others. This was new territory for them. Fear sharpened in those pauses. The Chancellor tried again. "Your destruction would mean nothing. The galaxy will go on without you." "Maybe," she said, "but you won't be here to see it." The false readings climbed higher, and with them came the first visible signs on a red giant surface. Plasma tongues whipping further out, solar wind thickening. The Empire's ships pulled back another fraction. Even if they suspected a trick, the chance, no matter how small, was a chance too many. No fleet commander wanted to be the one whose name became synonymous with annihilation. Behind her, Kellen's voice was quiet but steady. "They're running simulations. They'll take a few minutes to decide. That's all we need," she said. Her eyes stayed on the dreadnought, watching for the subtle pivot that would mean retreat. The Empire could posture for eternity, but it couldn't afford to lose an entire fleet for the sake of pride. Not anymore. Not with whispers spreading through its own ranks. Whispers she and her crew had planted like seeds in dry soil. The pivot came. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed. The dreadnought rotated away from the star, its escorts falling into formation like a tide receding. No farewell transmission, no declaration. Just a quiet, damning choice to live another day. The Mistral stayed in position until the last trace of their drives faded into the black. When the silence came, it was vast. She exhaled once, then gave the order to kill the emitters. The false readings dropped instantly. The star settled into its slow, dying rhythm, ignorant of the war had just helped win. Sarah turned from her station. They'll be back. Of course they will, Ilara said. But next time they'll remember what it felt like to doubt. They didn't keep the sphere. It was jettisoned into the red giant's corona, with a real heat and pressure torn apart in seconds. The message was simple. The blade had been drawn, and they'd chosen to sheath it again, not because they couldn't win, but because they would not let it be taken. Word traveled faster than any ship. By the time they reached the drift lanes, smaller vessels were already hailing them. Some offering aid, others just wanted to see the human captain who had made the Empire turn. The stories had started to grow in the telling, as stories always did. How she had stared down 1,000 ships, how the star itself had bent to her will. Myths were more dangerous than weapons, and she let them spread unchecked. In the weeks that followed, the Mistral moved like a shadow across the trade lanes, never staying long in one place, never allowing a pattern to form. The Empire searched, but it was searching for something that no longer existed. The crew adapted to the new reality. Allies they'd never had before, information offered freely, the faintest taste of respect in alien eyes. One night, in the quiet between jumps, Kellen sat with her in the dim light of the bridge. "You know they'll never forget this," he said. "That's the idea. They'll call it the day humanity drew its blade." She almost smiled. "And one day, they'll wonder if we still have it."